Hello everyone, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen and namaskarams to all Rasikas. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. I'm Sriram Iyer, President and co-founder of Layasaram Institute of Indian Arts, a Twin Cities-based 501c3 non-profit organization. Since 2010, Layasaram has been supporting the arts in the Twin Cities and around the world with the simple motto of perform, educate, and collaborate. Today's event is free, although you may make tax deductible contributions on our PayPal page at paypal.me/layasaram. It gives me and all of us immense pleasure to introduce today's event, Matrudevobhava, a tea time chat with composer and vocalist Shruthi Rajasekar when she talks about her life, love, and relationship with her mother, Nirmala Rajasekar. Nirmala needs no introduction to the listeners here. One of India's topmost Vanikas of this century, an accomplished musician, composer, a close friend, and a compassionate and a wonderful human being. To bring these luminaries together, finding time on their calendars, as you can imagine, is extremely difficult. And so, I thank them on behalf of all of you Rasikas today for their magnanimous gesture to put this event together at an ultra short notice. By the grace of God, my parents, my gurus, friends, and from around the world, my family, YouTube, Zoom, the internet, and all of you, I wish to thank all for helping us bring together this event for the first time in the history of Layasaram. There has hardly been a time when I have had conversations with Nirmala, and if I time it right, within the first 5 minutes, I don't hear her mention Shruti. So on this Mother's Day in 2020, I'm going to join all of you Rasikas as another Rasika to hear Shruti talk about her life, her love and relationship with her mother. Before we proceed, I would like to introduce to you our moderator for the event, Bhuvana Nandakumar. Bhuvana, as you might know, has been very kindly and graciously been the MC for many of our recent events. Bhuvana Nandakumar's early introduction to Kuchipudi and Bharatanatyam, the dance styles in India, taught her the importance of art in making, shaping, and even saving lives. Lifelong opportunities to listen and to attend innumerable concerts and performances have helped her develop into a connoisseur of the performing arts. Bhuvana, who also wears the hats of a daughter, a mother, a traveler, a student, a teacher, and a non-profit consultant. The choice of Bhuvana as a moderator did not come as an accident. Bhuvana is daughter to the renowned and illustrious Indian writer Dr. Prema Nandakumar. Dr. Prema Nandakumar obtained her PhD summa cum laude in English literature in 1961 when she was barely 22. With a doctorate for her study of Sri Aurobindo's epic poem Savitri, she followed that by her postdoctoral research work comparing Dante and Sri Aurobindo. Dr. Prema has well over 100 published books and articles in the field of literature, criticism, biography, translation, commentary, and fiction. One of Dr. Prema's most recent book, titled Women in Vedas, is a translation of women-related hymns from the Vedas. Her translation work of the poems of Sri Subramanya Bharati was jointly published by UNESCO and the Sahitya Academy in India. Dr. Prema is known for her eloquent style and is frequently invited as a keynote speaker at various national and international conferences. O daughter of this illustrious mother, happy Mother's Day to you and to all of you. I welcome you to moderate today's show for all of our viewers.
Hello, Namaskaram. On behalf of Layasaram Institute of Indian Arts, I welcome you all to this occasional event in an online series through which we hope to educate, collaborate, and hopefully even bring some performances to your living room. On this very special Mother's Day, I bring you a very special guest, Shruthi Rajasekar. In the spirit of Matrudevobhava, I would like to introduce Shruthi first through her mother. As Sriramji said, Shruthi is the daughter of well-known Twin Cities musician and veena player, Srimati Nirmala Rajasekar. And Shruthi is also a composer and vocalist in her own right. Trained in both Carnatic and Western classical music, she uses her unique background to create music that explores intersections in cultural identity. Shruthi is pursuing graduate studies in ethnomusicology and composition in the United Kingdom as a recipient of the coveted Marshall Scholarship. She is currently home in Minnesota with her family, waiting out this pandemic like all of us. Today, we are going to find out what it is like for Shruthi to have a musician as a mother. I also look forward to finding out more about her mother as a musician, but through Shruthi's eyes. Welcome, Shruthi. We are so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Auntie. Namaste, everyone. And thank you to Sriram Uncle and Bhuvana Auntie for having me and for those very, very kind words of welcome. But as you know, I'm just a student of music very early in my path. And I'm just immensely honored to be here to talk about such an important topic in my life, the most special person in my life, my mother. And happy Mother's Day to all of you, and to Bhuvana Auntie, happy Mother's Day to you. I hope you've had a chance to celebrate with your family.
Thank you, Shruthi. I'm greatly looking forward to chatting with you too about your Amma, Srimati Nirmala Rajasekar, and also hope to get a little bit of a behind the scenes glimpse from you.
Absolutely.
I also hope that at some point we can persuade your mother, to come and play for us, perhaps. And finally, I don't want to forget the audience. We have an audience right now from around the world. And I know that many of them would love to ask questions of both you and your mother, Shruthi. So those of you who are listening and viewing this show, you can post your questions in the chat window below as you're watching this live. We're not monitoring Twitter or Instagram at this point. So if you post your questions there, I'm really sorry, we might not get to it. So we might not also get to all the questions that are asked, depending upon the time, but we'll make sure to ask as many questions as possible in the limited time that we have. So Shruthi, any special Mother's Day celebrations today so far with Amma, or any plans for the evening?
Well, today is a slightly different Mother's Day compared to others, as I'm sure you know, as everyone's experiencing. We can't go out to brunch. It's very hard somehow with the shared household for me to sneak in different ingredients or plans. It's kind of hard to keep a secret when we're all ordering our groceries together and we can't just leave and sneak out the house and, you know, take a drive or something. But I think what's really special is for me to be home for this Mother's Day. I haven't been home for a few ones. And so there is a tiny silver lining in the situation that we're all in, is that some of us are able to spend more time with our families now. But you're right, I'll have to find a way to, I mean, this conversation is certainly a very special way for us to mark this Mother's Day, but I'll have to see. The thing about Amma is it's very hard to sneak anything past her. So if I want to get into the kitchen and quickly make something, the minute the gas is on, she'll smell it and she'll know what I'm up to, and she'll come cook something far better before I can do that. So.
Well, I'm going to first start by asking you about Nirmala ji, the musician, as your mother. I want to start by asking, what are your earliest memories of your mother? Not as a musician, but as Amma.
I think the two are tied together, and I'm told that my first word was Amma, like is the case with many kids. But we've always had a very, very close relationship. And so many times when she would go to rehearsals when I was 2 or 3 and daycare wasn't an option depending on the time of day, I would go along with her. And I'm told that I seem to behave usually in those situations. I was quiet enough. I mean, I certainly remember being sort of in awe of any music that I was hearing and wanting to take that in. So I know that I would go with my coloring books, but at those I would usually abandon in favor of watching the concert or rehearsal unfold in front of me. The two are definitely tied together. And I think when I think of Amma in my childhood, I think of sort of the soundscape that I grew up in, which is certainly the sounds of the kitchen, but intermixed with the sounds of the Shruthi box and the multiple Shruti boxes we have around our house. And of course, the Veena was, whether it's rehearsals in the basement with different collaborators, rehearsals on all sorts of levels, Amma singing as she cooks, Amma leaving the milk to boil while she's practicing, you know, the kind of multitasking that all mothers, I think, are very acquainted with. So I've got this sort of sensory memory of those early years, even before I could articulate this experience.
I completely identify with that. You know, I grew up in a family of writers, and my siblings and I, we could never say the word, I'm bored. Because the minute we said that, my mother would hand a book to us to read. And, you know, my memories of Amma, of my mother, are growing up when she was cooking and reading at the same time. And they were not recipe books, you know, they were just books that she wanted to read. And I have to admit that I'm like that too sometimes. I cook and read parallelly at the same time. So I completely identify when you say that.
You hold the book or do you prop it up on something? I'm very curious about this technique.
Well, I usually hold it in my hand because it's a Kindle, you know, and my Kindle is very oil splattered and, you know, spice splattered.
Has a lot of...
yeah. So I completely identify with that. You know, the intersection of music and life, everything is, you know, in many ways, music, and there's music attached to so many things that we do every day. Did your mother sing lullabies to you? Do you remember?
Yes, she wrote some actually, and one of them has become sort of an off-performed piece of hers, which is a setting of the Kurundohei, the Red Earth and Pouring Rain poem, if you're familiar with that particular Nyayum Nyayum. And she set that in Sahana, and I believe that first started as a lullaby for me. And I think that poem, I mean, it's talks about many kinds of love, but I think it certainly expresses our closeness. I mean, I feel like she's a part of me and I feel a part of her. I mean, we're just completely tied in that way, like the red earth and pouring rain. I mean, I think the other thing that I didn't really know until later was that Amma had to do all this musical activity sort of around our schedules. And when I was young, she was also working full time too. And so I didn't know that at the time that meant that she had to wake up very, very early or stay up very late to practice. And I think that's the kind of sacrifice that mothers are constantly making that you don't really know. And you're just wondering, why are they always working? Don't they want to take a break? But this is the kind of activity that they do to keep everything, you know, full household running and their careers. In Amma's case, she had two. So, I mean, it's really, really remarkable. And I'm sort of nearing, I mean, I'm currently the age Amma was when she got married, and I've been thinking about that a lot because that's not at all on my current plan, as it were. But I just can't imagine that kind of selflessness that she had and sort of maturity to be able to, and this is the case with all of our mothers in the sense, to put other people's needs before hers. And even something like music, which gives so much strength to so many people. And I consider her act of music to be a gift of generosity. She would put that, in some ways, had to fit that through whatever needs my brother and I had, my father had. So I only am starting to understand it now, and I don't think I even fully know the full details of that.
I think you're very right, and that's a very sensitive take on it. It's also the reason why we celebrate our mothers, and mothers have been celebrated, you know, all these over centuries, in fact, you know, since time immemorial, as they say. I think that's very true. Can you give me an example of organic learning? You talked a little bit about it, you know, about how you drop your coloring books and, you know, probably listen to the music. But can you give me examples of other ways in which you might have learned organically? For example, did your mother tell you stories of musicians, composers?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would say that my learning was ongoing all the time in so many different formats. So certainly, I know when I was attending rehearsals of hers, I'm told that I would come back singing the music that they were doing there, and in my childish voice. But I also really remember my car lessons. So as you know, of course, Amma is my guru. And I've had quite a few lessons in the car, which is not necessarily the most orthodox way. But I guess that's sort of gurukula taken to a whole nother level, where even when you're traveling, commuting somewhere else, you can keep the learning going. So we listened to a lot of music in the car. And I recall that when I was, say, first learning Manodharma and stuff, Amma would play a CD of some great artist, and we would listen to them, and she would pause the phrases as I was learning so that I could try to sing it back and try to pick up the swarams from it and try to express what it is that I picked up from that. So there was both sort of a structured and kind of the osmosis environment going on at all times. But I've learned lots of things in the car, and as a result, anyone who's ridden in the car with us has also picked up some things from those lessons.
Beautiful. I have, at this point, this is truly interactive. I have a request from the audience, and they want to know if you could sing a couple of lines of the lullaby.
Yeah, sure. I could give it a whirl. I could try.
That would be beautiful.
யாராகியரோர் எந்தையும் நுதையும் எம்முறை கேளர் யாயும் யாயும் யாராகியரோர்.
Beautiful, Shruti. Very beautiful.
Sorry, just
thank you for that little glimpse. Very nice. You were just touching on it when when this question came in and I asked you to sing, but you were touching on this very special relationship that even in the car, you were getting your lessons. You both share a very special relationship. What are the kind of things that you like to do together? Non-musical is fine.
Actually, just about everything. I think we share a lot of passions. So maybe now would be the time for me to reveal some of Amma's hobbies, which some might not know if they only know her as the musician. Amma is a voracious reader, and that runs in our family, certainly generationally. My grandparents are the same way, as are the family, cousins, everything. We've got bookshelves like yours throughout the Amma loves reading just about every genre, but her favorite genre is murder mysteries. Yes. So to a sort of alarming extent, she will read these books. You're kind of wondering what sort of knowledge is she taking away. I mean, she probably knows multiple ways to do away with an enemy. So stay on her good side. Super, super passionate. I think that possibly if she were not a musician, she might be a writer, because she's phenomenal as a narrator, as I'm sure you know, and she just has such a passion for that genre. But I think in the family, the tradition has sort of been Agatha Christie and Blyton, and I think this is very common for a lot of us who are sort of coming from that sort of UK, India experience. Of course, Empire, India experience is these authors are very important. But Amma's passion goes way beyond even those authors, which I love to read those authors, but she's always introducing me to new ones. So she's a huge reader, and kind of any chance that she gets to be able to read a book, that's what she loves to do. Amma's also a really passionate chef and baker. And a very experimental one, in the sense that I remember when we were having sleepovers, she would do the sort of build your own burrito station. And for a lot of my friends, particularly Indian American friends, they didn't really get that kind of food at home, but she will try everything. And I think she's a phenomenal cook. And so I've really taken that passion for food from her as well. And Amma loves to take walks too. So I've also gotten that sort of rumination and the fresh air. I mean, that's become something that's very valuable to all of us in COVID, but Amma has always had a passion for walks, particularly early morning walks by the lake when we're not in lockdown. That's one of her really favorite pastimes. So this are just a few of the many.
Oh, wow. Once this pandemic is over, I can't wait to exchange notes with her about murder mysteries and detective stories. That would be really cool. I can't wait for that. All right. So are there any ways in which the two of you are exact opposites of each other?
I think that one thing that's slightly different, I mean, we're quite similar, but I think one thing that's slightly different is I like to plan, and I get a little anxious if I don't, to some extent. I think that I've somewhat improvised, but I also like to have a plan. And we recently gave a presentation, a long one, and I wanted to have sort of a point-by-point plan of what was going on, just to make sure that's my attitude, just to make sure. Amma does not do that at all, in the sense that I know that she clearly thinks through what is the event about, but she's such a phenomenal improviser. I think, I mean, we know that in her music, but she can just speak on any topic extremely knowledgeably and with a lot of detail. So I think I think that we have similar styles of presentation, but I think that these have manifested in different ways. And I think I've gotten my traits of sort of planning from Appa. He's pretty meticulous in that sense. So that is one area where we realized, especially now that I've been away from home for a bit, we came together to do a presentation, and I realized that I have a slightly different way of doing it.
That is so interesting. And you mentioned your dad. I also noted you have a brother?
Yes, I have an older brother by 5 years, Neera Janna.
Neera Janna is your brother. Growing up as a part of the diaspora here, you grew up in Minnesota, right?
That is correct. I'm born and raised.
Right. Yeah, and so one of the important things that parents do here in the diaspora is try to keep the traditions of our parent culture alive here. And parents do this in many different ways. Apart from sharing music, what were the ways in which your mother kept traditions alive for Neeraj and you?
So I actually asked my brother this question, and in another separate conversation, he recently said something that I found really impactful that I didn't even know. My brother's a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of Minnesota currently, and he told me that his sort of sociological imagination, I believe that's the term, was sparked by Amma's musicianship, which is something I did not know. Anna is actually very, very musical and sort of one of those people who can hear something and immediately sing it, which was very aggravating if I was having one of my car lessons and then he would immediately sing the gamakam. I'm like, you're not even studying right now. But yes, he's sort of one of those types in all senses, very brainy individual. And something he told me was that Amma as a musician, certainly that's a cultural activity, but this sort of cross-cultural collaborative efforts that she's always been a part of since her time in Minnesota, even preceding that time, that idea of exchange and conversation, he said, was really sparked his interest in becoming a sociologist and studying what is it that makes us us. So he certainly looks at these influences like culture and, again, diaspora and these connections in his research. It's a big part of what he does. For myself, music has been a huge, huge part of that, because music for us is not just music, right? It's culturally tied. It's tied into our spiritual practice. It's tied into the sort of clothes and other customs that we might engage in and wear. It's really, really, it's very, it's got multiple sort of strands threaded together. It's entangled, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And that's a really, really beautiful relationship to have. So I think I was very lucky growing up to have that kind of anchor in my life, because I know that many of us struggled with that identity, sort of the tug between two worlds. And increasingly for us, there's this sort of nebulous world of what it means to be Indian American, which goes beyond tugging two worlds, but it's almost its own third world in a sense. And there's, it's a tapestry of different, it's not in any ways a single identity. There's a lot of ways to experience that. But music was definitely a huge way I was rooted in that. And of course, we sort of were practicing Hindus and we would go to the temple very often. But even at the temple, the way we worship is that we sit and sing. That's
right.
That's how we offer our sort of devotion to God. So it's all very tied together. But I think the other thing is that music brings community together. And I certainly think it has given me a community. So as you know, Amma is the artistic director of Nadrasa Center for Music. So she runs this very, very robust school here in Minnesota with many international students also. And we have such a strong community. It's such a powerful group of people brought together for their love of music and engaging in this culture. And I think I learned a lot from those folks as well. And they sort of grounded me and anchored me. So that was really, really important and influential for me.
Wow. Yeah. That actually gets me to another question that I've been wanting to ask you. We are, because you mentioned Nadrasa and how that was so much a part of your life. We are in so many ways our mother's daughters. I actually began by introducing you as Nirmalaji's daughter, right? How does it make you feel when you're defined by that, by being defined as Shruthi Rajasekar, daughter of Nirmala Rajasekar? Sriram just introduced me via my mother. So I have to ask you this question.
Yes, before I answer the question, Auntie, I was thinking a little bit more on your previous question and just also wanted to name that as part of the spiritual practice, we had been to, as kids, we went to Indialaya and Vidyapeetham too, and learned our cultural stories there from the aunties and uncles who taught us these things. So that's been really important. And I referenced that sort of even the mythology and such in the work that I do now. But to your question about being Nirmala's daughter, I am really, really proud of that identity. Actually, I love it. And I mean, it's at a very like practical level, I've been very, very lucky to have that because it certainly helps me in a lot of ways. Now, I've been for the last couple of years living in the United Kingdom and operating in a sphere that's like this music, but is slightly tangential and is slightly different. And so I had some interactions with musicians who had worked with Amma and sort of knew her reputation, and including Paramasamy Kripakaran uncle, who is a wonderful mridangam player in London and a student of Guru Karukudi Manisar. So that was really lovely to have that connection and to even be connected in that way while I was living abroad. But for the most part, I have been in circles where the instrument veena is not known, even if they're musical circles. And so it's always interesting for me when I try to introduce or share what my background was and explain that I come from sort of a musical household and I had music growing up. It's, yeah, sometimes I just send them a link to Amma if they really are curious about more. But I have to say I've been, for the most part, operating with people who might not know that background and might not know that I'm her daughter. So that's been interesting to have that hat sometimes and not have it other times.
Yeah, yeah. So some artists' children follow their parents into the art as an art tradition. Some others choose a different path than their parents. You in some ways have been able to do a beautiful amalgam of both, you know. You've stayed in the broader realm of music, and yet you've definitely carved a niche of your own. Did you ever think of following a different path, maybe as a food critic, a travel writer, a detective?
Thank you for that question, Auntie. And that's very kind to say that I've carved a niche, but I'm very, very early. If I'm carving anything, I'm still really beating at the rock trying to make one imprint. So it's too soon, I suppose, to say that. But first, in terms of if I thought of something else, I think like a lot of students, I was passionate about a lot of subjects, and that made it quite hard when I went to college. I chose a school that had a liberal arts program for that reason, so that I could take it in all sorts of fields. So some other interests of mine include neuroscience, Russian history. I'm particularly passionate about pre-Russian Revolution, so all the czars. I find that incredibly fascinating. I love that. I guess my interest in history is sort of like I like gossip, so history is just a sort of academic version of gossip, I suppose. But I mean, and truly the social sciences have always interested me as well. And this idea of cognitive science was related to music. I was always interested in music and the brain. So I knew that music would be a huge part of my life always, but I actually chose that it would be a career only a couple years ago. When I think the path of composition became slightly more illuminated for me. I always wanted to keep singing and I continue to sing, but this idea of composing repertoire that brings together all of these facets of my personal identity is very important to me. So I feel that my career is music, but it's also just getting to explore myself, which I feel very fortunate to have that.
Very interesting. Recently, you touched on this, so I want to get to that. The Guardian newspaper asked the United Kingdom's leading conductors to nominate a composer who deserves wider recognition on the occasion of International Women's Day. And you were one of 10 that were nominated. This is an incredible feat in and of itself. You talk about carving a niche. This is where you are, you know, beginning to carve that niche. No doubt about that. But when you see this in the context of the fact that out of the 10, the range, they were all the way from people from, ladies from Azerbaijan to Israel. And I think 3 of the 10 composers were born in the 1800s. And then all the way down to you, you know, the youngest of the lot. This is very, very impressive. Congratulations, Shruthi. What an amazing achievement that is. The specific piece that they highlighted is one that you composed for the National Youth Choir of Great Britain, and it's called Numbers. Sriramji, would it be possible to play a small clip from that?
Certainly.
I find this so fascinating. It's interesting not to have words, but to sing, but rather to have a string of numbers. What gave you this idea?
Well, thank you so much, Auntie, for first your very, very kind comments about the Guardian article. I was truly so humbled and honored to be included in a list of so many of my favorites. And I have to thank for that the conductor in that performance, Robert Hollingworth, who conducts a multitude of really impressive ensembles in the UK. Here, it's the 24 choir of the University of York, who gave the first live performance of Numbers in February of this year. So I'm really, really fortunate to have been given that recommendation by him. That's just very, very kind. But yes, Numbers seems to have resonated with a lot of people, which is I find funny because I wrote it as rather just a joyful, humorous piece, and it seems to have struck a chord. So Numbers is conceived in sort of 3 sections, and do cut me off if I'm speaking too long about this piece because I get quite excited talking about it. The first section is about the Babylonian numerical system. So I kind of wanted to do each section on a different, what's called positional numerical system, which is different ways of counting we've had in humankind. So the Babylonian one is base 60. And so it's also still a remnant that we have today because we've got time, clocks are base 60, we've got degrees. So we still have this system. But it is remarkably in notation quite similar to the base 10 system, but it resets at 60. That's the main thing. The interesting thing is they didn't have the word zero, or rather they didn't notate the word zero in any sense. They had the concept of nothing, but they didn't notate it. So that section has no zero, and it also has no rest in it. So it's continuous music the whole time. And that's where the 59 comes from. But in terms of sort of the Carnatic connection, you see, Numbers is a very nice way of understanding swaras. So in Western music, we talk about scale degrees. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 corresponds to, of course, sa re ga ma pa da ni. So we also use scale degrees sometimes when we're doing training to break down a line. We'll say which degree it's in relation to the tonic, in relation to sa. So this first section here is actually in the Raga Chalanarte, which is really, really special to me. And it was a way for me to share raga and this idea of a raga without, expecting too much external knowledge to access it. So that there's 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a line like that. That's just ga ma ri ga ma pa ni pa ma, or rather da pa ma. So it's actually that full section is Chalanarte. So that's where, there's this other language always underlying all of my work, because Carnatic music is my first language. I would say I'm a native speaker of that and hoping to become better and better with my second language. But of course,
this is very fascinating. It's fascinating. And when we talk about Amma as a musician, which will be the next section, which I will segue into in just a second, I would like to know more about how you navigate between worlds. But before we conclude this section about, having a musician as a mother, I want to talk about, I understand that you and Amma share a very special bond, but, I want to talk about the fact there's 2 others in your family, your father and your brother. And I just wanted to quickly ask you, what kind of a role did they play in your musical journey?
Actually, a huge one, and one that I'm just starting to really understand and unpack. I mean, as the Carnatic influence, and Amma's as a musician, I should mention Amma's a Carnatic musician, but one who collaborates a lot. That was really my early imagination. It's because of the Western classical musicians that she worked with and Western musicians of other genres that she worked with that I even had, a background in that and then sought lessons in that field. But Anna and Appa have been a huge influence as well, too. So Appa is a huge fan of sort of Bollywood music of yesteryear. So that's Kishore Kumar and Mohammed Rafi and singers like them.
Wow.
He's a huge, huge fan. So we've still got cassette tapes of that. I think I don't even know if he's converted them into another format. But I grew up listening to that music. And of course, Bollywood music is a very, very interesting, especially of those years too, is a very interesting idea of melding things from another world. So it's a slightly different approach that I take, but one that's I've certainly in my ears. And that style of singing, of course, something I listen to. And I just realized I was writing a song for a postgraduate class of mine, and we were analyzing some of the influences in it. And there are some rock influences in it from sort of circa mid-2000s American rock. And my professor was trying to analyze where is this coming from. And I realized that's my brother's playlist that's feeding in here. So it's specifically—
Oh, that is so interesting.
the band Red Hot Chili Peppers. And I was the kind of, younger sister. I was a very annoying younger sister first, I should mention. I think I was always like tattling on him, but I adored him. I worshipped him and I just wanted to do everything he did. So I copied him to the ninth in every degree. So any music he was listening to, I immediately had to listen to it too, even if it wasn't necessarily what my peers were listening to. But Anna is, of course, he's a big OST fan, original soundtrack. So now he's always sending me, he loves Rahman, but he's also sending me all sorts of like really magnificent soundtracks and saying, hey, you should write music like this, like get to work, learn how to do this. So that's a big, source of inspiration as well.
He has his own personal composer. Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I come up to scratch with them, but I think he thinks I'm slowly getting there.
That's very interesting. All right, let's segue a little bit into Amma as a musician. Do you have any favorite concerts of your mother's, or perhaps memories of something from your mother's concerts that might come right to you?
I think every Carnatic one has been inspiring. I mean, this might seem like a small thing, but it's always been something that's huge to me. I am always captivated during Amma's concerts, which frankly, I cannot say for every musical experience, because sometimes when we listen to music, our mind wanders, and I will be the first to say that happens to me too. And I think that's part of it. I think you should enjoy music in any way that you want. And if your mind is going elsewhere, if you're slowly lulled to sleep, that's part of the experience, But I have to say, I have been captivated by every Carnatic Kacheri of Amma's, which, I mean, like, as in riveted, in the sense that I only start analyzing it later. I'm just sort of struck by her. And I don't know if that's her as an artist, or maybe that's compounded by our relationship, but I find her just so captivating. But I think in terms of slightly different projects, I remember as a child when she would do music with Robert Bly, the great American poet. And he did a set of translations of Mirabai poetry, and Amma tuned those and provided music with those. And I remember seeing that collaborative experience, being very young and not necessarily knowing the details. I mean, I think I was maybe 4 at the first one, maybe even younger. I don't remember. But I remember knowing that being, in awe that this kind of thing could happen. This kind of art could also happen. And it was just as powerful as the Carnatic Kacheris for me. So those are just 2 memories that come to mind. It's always fun to watch Amma during the seasons, certainly, because those are sort of rapid fire concerts. I went to the season last winter also. I went from England there. So we all met up, Amma, Appa, and I met up in Chennai, which was really nice. I was just there for 12 days. I didn't have a long Christmas vacation. But in, I think, those 12 days, Amma played like 14 kacheris or more in just the 12 days. I'm not even sure. It was more than 1 a day for sure. I was exhausted secondhand, but she is just electrifying how she would go. I mean, every artist that we got to see was really special.
Yeah, but this thing that you say about being captivated by your mother's performances, I have to tell you that you're not alone. From the first time I saw her perform, I have felt the same way. She is absolutely captivating. It's an scintillating, oft-used words, but in her case, it's true. Her music truly captivates you. And when you're in a concert, that she's presenting, it's an entirely different experience. It's very elevating and also very captivating.
I can use a little bit of that too, having sat up close sometimes and so on the stage if I'm putting talam. Something that really sort of seems like otherworldly to me is that she will get chills on her, she's not even aware of this, on her arms and on her cheeks and skin. She will have chills as she's singing, which to me, and when I tell her this later, she teases me or disputes this, but to me, it almost seems like it's an out of body or otherworldly experience that I am witnessing. And it's shocking, it's like, this is my mom. This is just my silly, funky mom, who I joke with and all the time. And, we're very close, but I'm not kidding when I say I've seen those, and I'm constantly looking at I never get those goosebumps when I perform, but it's really like, it is actually something that seems like it's from another world.
Right, yeah. Well, Amma is your guru. She's certainly your first guru. And I'm assuming that you started learning Carnatic music formally from your mother, or did you have other gurus?
I've had a lot of wonderful mentors sort of influenced me. And I would sort of name two particularly in that, who first is Shri B. Sitarama Sharma, also known as Shri Sharma sir for me, who's actually one of Amma's gurus. She studied with him and Shri T.M. Krishna together actually when they were kids. They used to be classmates in class. So I studied with him one summer in India, who was really, really wonderful as well. And I also have to mention, I consider him another guru of mine. I don't know if he claims me as a student, but Tanjavur Shri K. Murugabhupati also, sir, he's had a big influence on me, rhythmically speaking. I think of him as my rhythm guru, although usually people don't have such a separate entity. I'm so interested in rhythm that I get that kind of guidance from him. Those two have been very impactful. So has Shri BMS Sundaram Mama, who is, the eminence musicologist. And Amma's had many other mentors come through and visit Nadarasa, and I've been very fortunate to study with them as well. But actually, Amma at some point wanted me to study with another guru because she thought that would be another way to enhance the experience for me. But I always only wanted to study with her. So that was my personal choice. Yes.
And then you had your arrangement when you were what, 15?
15, yes.
Barely in high school. How did Nirmalaji help you with preparation for that? Were there any memorable pieces of advice for that first big concert that you had?
There's sort of one that still sticks with me. One of the pieces that I sang was Sri Shyama Shastri's Mayama in the Raga Ahiri. And when I was first learning this piece, I'd kind of made some mistakes in the way that I'd learned it. So I had to sort of correct it and unlearn it, which is a tough thing to do. And Amma has this sort of axiom that she shares with all of her students, which is that you should sing a piece 100 times minimum before you present it on stage. And being the sort of defiant teenager that I was, and this, Mayama was on the program, I said to myself, I will sing it 100 times and then prove to her that I still have not mastered it, and then we will take it off the program. It was almost an act of defiance that I did this. And then around time, she didn't say anything, by the way, but now she's never told me I need to practice anything, which can be difficult when I didn't have any self-discipline. But she's always the kind that's like, you find it for yourself. That's always been her way. So she didn't say anything when I was attempting this 100-time rendition so that I would not have to sing it on the program. But by 2027 for myself, I had fallen in love with the song. And I think that is the message that she's getting across. Yeah, maybe 100 times helps with sort of technical activities. But when you spend that time with the repertoire, you find shades of yourself in it and how you can connect. So just another grain of wisdom from Amma. And she's got tons of these kernels.
Right. And I was just going to say, there is that wise mother, out there in the background, trying to kind of guide you into this, stepping back because she knows you're still a teenager at that time, and yet, making you come to your conclusion on your own. I think that is that's definitely a mark of wisdom. And one thing again about your mother, she has not limited herself to Carnatic music. She's actively collaborated with many disciplines, including Western classical music, jazz, Chinese music, poetry, and even dance. Her latest album, Maitri, The Music of Friendship, features musicians playing instruments from around the world. You too have worked with music of so many different kinds: opera, chamber music, orchestra, film, theater, and of course, Carnatic music. When did you start experimenting with other genres of music?
Auntie, I think my Carnatic music education started, and because of Amma's interest in these other pursuits, my other musical or broader musical education happened parallelly at the same time. Like you mentioned, Amma was doing projects with, illustrious dance company Ragamala in town and many other collaborations around the country. And in terms of sort of non-Indian genre, she was working with ensembles like Zeitgeist. She's working with the composer Jan Gilbert, who's a Western classical composer, and was the first person to sort of introduce me to this idea of I can buy a notation software and put music and type it there. I don't just have to scribble things on by hand. So she showed me that. Of course, the musicians of Maitri have been hugely influential. They're people she's worked with throughout time, whether with the new music ensemble Zeitgeist or in other collaborative settings. So these aunties and uncles, I call them aunties and uncles, even though that's maybe not a term that's native to them. They have been a huge part of my education. Many of them taught me examples of how to read and write. Just one example is when I was in 10th grade, so this was 2012, Amma and I did a mother-daughter piece for the first time for the ensemble Zeitgeist, which is a new music chamber ensemble, so 5 instruments. And she wrote sort of one half and I wrote the other half. Her half is called Summer Rain, my half Morning Dew. When I brought in the piece, I just had one line of music, basically. I really hadn't known, how do I write for these different parts? I didn't have any formal Western compositional training. I just had some swaras in my head, basically, that I'd written down. And those musicians took the piece and helped me basically orchestrate it, showed me the skills of how do you write for these different instruments, which I didn't really know what's the difference between them, because in Carnatic repertoire, we have the same music, you know, across the instruments, but they showed me the nuances. And so they really guided me in that piece. And now it's a piece that they continue to play, but it's sort of as much my piece as it is theirs. So that's just an example of how the Amma and the environment around her was like truly my source of education.
Wonderful, wonderful. I have a related question, and this is from a listener, a viewer, actually, who talks about how you've done a wonderful balancing act of excelling in Indian classical music, but also the Western system. What is your advice to youngsters who are at the crossroads of making a choice between the two?
I think sort of well, that's very kind. First of all, I should say that remark. I'm like I said, still starting out. But when it comes to making a choice, that sort of wording, I think the answer is right there, that you don't have to make a choice. You know, I have had teachers sort of never Amma, but mentors in sort of both styles who have said, especially in the Western classical style, who've said that, you know, from a technical perspective, it's not possible to do both. And truly from the voice, you know, they occupy very different registers and it is hard to switch between them. But I think just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean that it can't be done now too. So I would say if both are a big part of your life, then keep them up. From a very technical perspective, I was very thoroughly in Carnatic music before I started Western classical, and I think that really helped me. So I had one language that I've developed very strongly, sort of one vocal technique, because I do know that early days of switching were very, very hard, and if I didn't have that Carnatic grounding, it would have been harder. So that's my personal experience, but I think, you know, we live in a world where hyphenations are common, so I don't think you have to be one or the other.
I think you put that very beautifully. Choosing one path or the other is fine, but if you want to be hyphenated, there's absolutely, the choice exists. And I think that you said that very beautifully. I mean, you are right. Hyphenation is becoming pretty common these days. Is Amma around there?
Yes, I can bring her in. Just give me one moment.
In the meantime, since we're lucky now and we also have Nirmala ji with us, I just wanted to tell you once again, as you're listening, if you have any questions for either Nirmala ji or for Shruthi, please add the questions to the comments right below in the chat box, right below the live feed that you're watching from right now. And hopefully we will have time to ask those questions of Nirmala ji and Shruthi. Namaskaram, Nirmala ji. How are you? Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Namaskaram. And thank you, Sriram and Bhuvana, for having this Mother's Day celebration. I've been watching it on Facebook Live in the other room with a headphone, which I never do. So that's a first for me. And what insightful questions, and happy Mother's Day to all the people who have joined us today. I hope you all are safe, healthy, and taking care of yourselves.
It has been such a pleasure to chat with Shruthi and catch a glimpse of,
thank you.
and to catch a glimpse of what makes her and her mother tick. But can you tell us a little bit about your mother, Nirmala? Is she a musician too? Did you learn music from her? What are your favorite memories of her from childhood?
Well, I'm so glad you asked about Amma. Amma, my mother's name is Chandra, the moon. And Amma is like the moon. You know, she's radiant. She's very friendly. She's a very cool person and was considered quite cool even when I was in school and college and all of that. I lived with my parents till age 16 all over the country because my father was in a job that took us all over the place and in India. And when I was 16, my father left to serve the bank in Iran. So that was a big decision. I was in 12th grade and I decided to stay back because my tata, whose 108th birthday is today, he's wishing us from heaven. He lived till age 90.
Wow.
Yes, till age 98 with us, and he's wishing us, I'm sure, today. And I think of Venkataraman Tata, my father's father, who said to my father, if you send her to the school dormitory, the hostel as we call it in high school, then we don't know how she can continue her veena. So why don't you let her stay with us? So that is the story of how I lived in a very big joint family and had about 16 people in that family from a home of 4. I went to a family of 16 where a lot of grandpas, uncles, and the whole joint family system takes a very different concept. And they all raised me to be what I am, good, bad, ugly, you have to ask them. But they always used to say that Amma did such a fantastic job when we were growing up that I knew how to come from a family of 4 with my sister and myself and my parents to come to this family of 16 where love and affection was showered from Tata to my Attapati to my Chitapas, my Chittis, my cousins who I'm very, very close to. And Amma was a very fine musician, but she did not take up a music career. She supported my father, whose job as a banker took us all over the country and outside the country too. But very recently, in fact, in this COVID quarantine period, there was something I wanted to do very differently, and that was to take the Annapurnashtakam, Nityanandakari Varabhaya, which I learned from my mother, just tagging along as Shruthi was talking about going with her mother. I used to go to classes with my mother with this very well-known vocalist called Parni Vijayalakshmi. And this lady was the lady who taught my mother this Annapurnashtakam along with some other women in that neighborhood. So after many, many years, in fact, many decades, I should say, I picked up Annapurnashtakam, relearned it, recorded it, and sent it to my mother just about 2-3 weeks ago. The influence my mother has had in my life as a music supporter, as my mom, which is huge, it just cannot be explained in words. She was the person who took me to music classes when Tata could not, because she was the head of the joint family, had to do everything, as the Appa's wife. Appa is the oldest son in the family, and you know how it is with the Indian culture. When the lady of the house, there was no party. My grandma died very many years ago. So my mother took on all of that. And coming from the youngest child in her family to taking on all the responsibility in my father's family was a big, big step. But the one thing she kept going with the music for me, Amma tells me stories of about how she would have people over for food, and suddenly some unexpected people, somebody would come from out of town, and in our culture and our homes, immediately they've served a meal, and Amma, somebody will say, can you make puris? And not realizing puri is such a quick job, Amma would make them out. And guess what? Who's the entertainer? Yours truly. I would love to go sit there and play and sing. And there were times when I was really young that I have even taken the puris, not realizing, and put it in the bucket of water rather than the oil that my mother was supposed to have. I didn't know any better. I just thought I was helping her. But then Amma said, better to banish this one from the kitchen, and sent off me to do the entertainment. And I loved it. I just enjoyed it. So I think she must have been responsible for nurturing all those feelings in me about wanting to just share and get joy from sharing. And I think that's truly who I am. In fact, my kids, I don't think Shruthi told you this, both of them and many people around me might get embarrassed because I will burst into song in the middle of the road. They will walk as far as possible away from me.
I think you did it last week on our walk.
It's possible.
Here's what I want you to do right now, Nirmala ji. Yes. Please burst into song, just a couple of lines of Annapurnashtakam in honor of your mother.
Nityanandakari Varabhayakari Saundarya Ratnakari Nirduta Kila Gora Papanakari Pratyaksha Maheshwari Kaya Chala. Now this will go on, Annapurnashtakam is quite a bit. So
beautiful.
Going to
beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for sharing that little glimpse with us. It's been such a joy, to listen to you. And I'm sure it was a joy for you to also listen to Shruthi when she was growing up. I have a question for you about motherhood and music. It's actually 2 questions in one. How did being a mother make you a better musician? And how did being a musician make you a better mother?
Now, you're assuming better on both sides. First and foremost, let's shoot that down, Bhuvana. That's a very...
Well, let me say one thing. when you said the words good, bad, ugly earlier, when you were talking earlier, I was thinking, what does Nirmala ji, what is she talking about? Good, bad, ugly? It's good, better, best.
Well,
You have some good days, you have some better days, and then you have some of your best days. So, let's leave that.
Simply my influence of Westerns. Okay, I grew up watching a lot of Westerns, so good, bad, ugly comes very naturally to me.
Yes, I get
Clint Eastwood used to be the man, so
It's not a murder mystery, is it?
no, that's no, Sriram. We got to go to Anne Perry and Joanne Fluke and people like that for that. That area. Well, I'm really going to leave that word better mother, but I can say how it makes me a mother, how it makes me a musician. I don't know. I don't see the line, Bhuvana. I have to say that to you. I don't see the line. I, in fact, think that my family, particularly Shruthi and Neeraj and Raj, those that live with me on a day-to-day basis, and many of my friends too, I have to say this, I have some very, very dear friends who know this about me. They have to put up with a lot of my idiosyncrasies, my craziness and my madness as a human being. Because that's the one thing about myself that's a constant. I never know what my next minute is going to be. I'm quite a person that gives in to impulse. I know that I have to, take care of my family, but I don't think I've done such a hard job. And I think that's a doubt that happens for many of us working mothers, particularly those that don't have vacation days and working days. For me, every day is a holiday, every day is a working day. So when that happens, then how are we going to distinguish, this is my work day, this is my holiday. And then we women want to be everything. I mean, I think that's a gift that God has given us. Being a mother is a gift. And you asked Annapurnashtakam, that is the supreme mother, the mother who feeds us all. What an appropriate thing to ask about. I'm glad I remembered the universal mother. And I love to cook, so they eat whatever I make. Till today, nobody has ever said, maybe it is out of sheer fear of what will come out of the kitchen. Nobody said, today can we have rajma, or today can we have chole, or sambar, or idli, or dosha. Nobody in our family ever says that. They just, whatever I cook, which is also, I open the fridge and I said, okay, shall I make some interesting something with Brussels sprouts? Not a standard beans curry or something that we're used to making, but I'll just open the fridge and figure out.
It's an amazing kale dal I ate for lunch today.
Yeah, I just made
I adore kale, and you made kale dal, and it was delicious.
Are you by any chance talking about your life or my life? Because they sound very similar at this point.
Now, because we all have multiple lives these days. By God's grace, we can take these avatars. And I really feel sometimes I could be a much better mother and a much better musician constantly. Musicianship is a gift of loving music. That's all musicianship is. You're a rasika. And when you're a rasika and want to share, and there you go on to the next level. That is the rasika tanmay, or the feeling of being a rasika. So there is constant room for improvement, and I never will ever feel satisfied with my performance. Now, this is not because I like to find holes, but I truly know I can do better as a musician. Similarly, I truly know I can be a mother. But one thing having these tasks on my plate, I don't think of them as tasks, but just the way I am, teaches you to plan a little better with your time, at least time boundaries on things which are hard for me to do. Sometimes when I'm practicing and I have to get up and go do something else. Or if I'm finishing practice and I'm very, very tired and I have the laundry or ironing or something. By the way, I'm not a big fan of ironing. I have a magnet which says, say no to ironing. That's just one of my tasks that I'm not fond of. But I really believe that they kind of cross over, and you do know what you have to do. Luckily, I'm a morning person, but at the same time, I can stay up late if I have to, because I know that's concerts go late sometimes, and we come home very, very late. So I can do both ends of that. So luckily, I'm not bound by time. And what triggers me on is just the fact that I'm a mom, and the fact that I'm a musician. And that is my life. I got up this morning and I went to bed very late because of certain other projects that are going on. But I got up this morning and Shruthi comes and says, good morning, Mom, happy Mother's Day. And I don't know how she managed to do that, but right next to my bedside, there was a big sheet of paper. I wish I could show it to you, but you won't be able to read on this screen. So many beautiful things that are written. And I think that is the energy that you get for being a mother. I know I haven't done anything there to deserve such a big letter. I know this. I know this for a fact. It's just that the children that you get and are blessed with in this life God has taken care of you there also. And he's given you these kids who just give you this, these beautiful notes where they are just telling you, Mom, don't worry, you be your crazy self. We'll adjust to you and we'll actually see good things about it where there's nothing to be seen. But that's the love I have been blessed with this one. And I have another one too, my older fellow who's living away from home now. And he's got his own sweet personality. He's a hip hop person. I don't know if Shruti got a chance to tell you. He played violin for
A little bit.
12 years violin, then some guitar music, and then we start singing Hamsadvani and he wants to join in. I mean, that's all I can say is music is a great companion. So we are fortunate to have this companion in our life. And I think art itself is great, which is why we are all together today.
Right. Very beautifully said, spoken like a true mother, a true artist, a creative person, for sure. Thank you so much. I am, in the interest of time now, I am going to open up this chat to the audience for questions. So if you're viewing this program live, go ahead and post your question in the chat box. Once again, we're not monitoring Instagram or Twitter right now, and apologize for the inconvenience. What would you like to know from Shruti and or Nirmala-ji? Sriram-ji and I are going to alternate with the questions. Sriram-ji, do you have a question from the audience for our guests today?
So if I could, I would have a round of rapid fire questions. That's the amount of questions that are coming in. And I'm glad that we didn't open up Facebook and Instagram and Twitter for questions. So, but one thing I have to mention this before I go to the question. Innumerable amounts of time that I have gone to Nirmala's house for practice, every time, without fail, she will ask me, have I eaten? I have made this. Would you like to have? And I would always wonder, when does she have the time to think about, kind of balance out making food and think about what I have eaten or not, and also think about music with as much amount of, intent and veracity in being able to deliver good on the food as well as on the music. So thank you and that's why I said she's one of the most compassionate and wonderful persons that I have known. So with that, I'd like to go to the questions. Question I have is there a dream project that the two of you want to work together that you haven't already?
Yes, may I say?
Go for it.
I would love to someday soon, perhaps, write a Veena concerto. So Veena concerto being where they feature the solo instrument, and have a proper orchestra with Veena piece that would be quite significant in length. Is certainly one dream I have. Do you have other dreams?
Yes.
21 Veena Ganam, we can make that happen.
Multiple Veenas, why
It's
not?
true.
You have a dream project.
Yes, I do. Hanuman the opera. This is my dream. Hanuman.
Wow.
Yes, Hanuman stands for, in my book, I've grown up with affection, love, awe of this great personality from the Indian culture. Stands for staunch friendship. Sriram, thank you for those kind words. We go back many, many years, people. So please remember Sriram's a dear friend. And Sriram again will take whatever I offer out of kindness of his heart, not because it was awesome, but thank you for those kind words anyway. And coming back to Hanuman the opera, if at all it comes to fruition, it will have all the genres of music that I have had the experience. I haven't yet talked to it with many of my friends who are collaborators, but it's something that I've been brainstorming with some of my friends at Nadarasa, and I have been reading up about it. And we don't have a timeline on it, but that is something that I would like to bring. We've done projects of Sangam where we brought different forms of South Indian Carnatic music with the classical music. We've got Carnatic Energy, my jazz band with Anthony Cox, Srini, Marcus Weiss, the tabla player. Sublime Journey, Sriram has played on this. Several of my friends here, Balaji Chandran, Nitirajan, Shankaran Nambudripad, B. Srinivasan on several albums. That's another thing I want to just place on record. We are very lucky in Minnesota to have these master artists living here. I don't know whether it's the snow that brings us together or the ice or the crazy weather that we drive to each other's homes for rehearsals, but we have a very strong community of awesome, phenomenal, high quality artists in Minnesota. And our next gen is nothing but the best. I'm proud to say this, that we have very fine musicians in town. Vinod Krishan is another name that comes to mind in the musical community. Pooja Goswami from the Hindustani world. And there are many, many brilliant musicians and phenomenal dancers here. There's a great bunch of theater people here. What more can we ask for? I mean, Minnesota people, I heard this when I'd gone once to the East Coast. You have so much happening. It's a very close secret, though. I said, it's not a secret, but it's a well-known fact. But then people don't realize right in the middle of the Midwest, here is this frozen tundra where music and art and dance and theater and sculpture, everything is thriving beyond imagination. And next gen is ready to take it over. In all the forms. I'm not
you have to live here to know that.
Yes, and I'm not taking away, therefore, the contributions from the scientists, the doctors, the engineers, the civic people that take care of our community, not taking away any of that. But on the art side, coming from the fact that, you know, that's where I live my life, we just have a very strong community here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And here's a question about your collaborations. In the interest of time, I think this is going to be the last question. I just got a message from Sriram saying that, what was the most inspiring moment you had while you were collaborating with each other? And what was the most challenging? So I guess this is a question for both of you.
Do you have a thought? Yes, Shruti loves to put things down on paper. And I love to not do that. So I am extremely manodharmam. I love to do things on the fly. But we've had 2-3 opportunities for which we thank Karnataka, India, for we've been in the New Year celebrations. It's called the Eastern Ethnic New Year celebration, that they call it that way. And Shruti and I have put together some pieces for them. So that has been a wonderful experience, but challenging, because I had to play exactly what she wanted me to play with no practice, no rehearsal. This would have been created 5 minutes before we went on stage, because I would have had a kacheri until that point. This celebration begins at 9 at night and goes past the midnight hour. So we would not have had much time to prepare. So that would be both a challenge and an exhilarating thing. Shruti, do you have something to say?
Yes, I think that there are definitely sort of technical things that can be difficult about those particular collaborations. If Amma has to say change key, you know, we stay with the same saw for a whole concert. We don't, not just one piece. So certainly those things. But what I find always inspiring is to say, if I'm arranging something that I'd originally done for piano for Veena, there are just infinite possibilities that when I give it to her in her hand, it just, the music completely transforms to the extent that I wonder, why did I bother with my own work in the first place? Because she just brings this, I mean, she's a creative in so many levels, which is why our collaborations work so well. But she's absolutely brilliant as a musician too. So
did you really mean that? I think she was trying to say there's no point in writing music for this woman. She's going to break the score anyway.
No, it's truly, I mean, it's just a transformation of the first order.
But that is a process of creativity too. So, you know, it's so much a part of the process, just making and breaking and changing and transforming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and blowing thoughts. So, you know, I think both of you are speaking the same language, even when you're not speaking the same language.
You're very
just so beautiful to see.
And I do want to make a request to all of you all. Please support the arts. Please support organizations like Lysaram. Please support MCs and brilliant people like Bhuvana to keep our traditions going, because we have something very special that we've all experienced in art. And of course, we all need your wishes. I do. And please bless this young lady as she sets out on her journey. We thrive only on those positive messages and vibes that we get from you. And happy Mother's Day. And thanks for having us here.
Absolutely, Nirmala ji. Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm sorry, that's all the time that we have for the questions today. But wait, we can't finish this program without listening to some Veena Ganam. Nirmala ji, would it be possible for you to play a short piece for us?
Yes, and I think Sriram's going to do this. We've actually, Bhuvana, what we've done is we've played it already, just in the interest of me having to go tune. That will take a few minutes. We have 7 strings to get into picture here.
Right.
So we've already got something queued up for you. And I invite you all to share my dream of presenting a song by the great Subramanya Bharati, a poet beyond his times from South India, where he talks about young children and the love he has as a parent for the young children. And I thought, as a mother, as a parent, this would be my tribute to all my kids, which means not only my own, born and raised here in my house, but every child that I have come across in this world who are our tomorrows and who are the reason why we exist. When I go to class, that's the most beautiful thing I see in my school. When you see 60 faces saying, hello, auntie, and even on the Zoom sessions, I hate it when I have to say goodbye and finish the session because they all will say goodbye, auntie. And that's probably my most favorite part of the class, not because we're finishing class, but because I get to, hear those lovely voices with so much affection. Chinnanjirikiliye kannamma, Shelva Kalanjiyame in the language Tamil.
Beautiful. Chinnanjirikiliye, Bharatiya's immortal Krishna song. What an appropriate and fitting tribute. Shruti, aren't we all Kannamas to our mothers?
Absolutely. And we are so blessed to have such special and powerful women in our lives shaping and
That's right. That's right. What is really unusual about this song for me personally, I did not know that that's what she was going to play. This actually brings me back full circle to my own mother. And one of her first published books, in fact, I think it was the first published book of hers, was Poems of Subramanya Bharati. And it was published by UNESCO. And I actually have a later edition. It's called, it was originally called Bharati in English verse and later published as Poems of Bharati. It's an expanded version of the same. So this is really, really coming full circle for me. So I just wanted to read Amma's translation of the lines that Nirmala ji just played. My fledgling Kannamma, riches infinite, you came to redeem me and greaten my fame. So those are the first 4 lines. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Nirmala ji. You gave me an opportunity to recognize my own mother through your music. That was really beautiful. And thank you, Shruti. It was such a pleasure chatting with you. Wishing you the very best in all your endeavors.
Thank you, Uncle. Thank you, Auntie. It was such an honor and such treats for me to get to participate in something like this. So thank you for thinking of me, and happy Mother's Day to everyone.
Thank you so much. Now, if you are like me and you want to listen to the rest of Nirmala ji's song, you'll find a link in the comments to the stream as well as on Lysaram's Facebook page. So you can see them there. Thank you for sharing your mother with all of us, Shruti. Have a wonderful rest of Mother's Day.
Thank you. Same to you. Happy Mother's Day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
இதுவரை